Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Can you talk through then for the listeners kind of what they heard you say, kind of money management, 10 offices, Middle Tennessee, but give some more color on like what it is that you're doing and how you're helping people here now.
So somebody comes in and they say, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's what my investments are. I typically act like a doctor in a way where the doctor goes, hey, here's what you got going on. Here are the problems and here's where it leads if you continue this process. So typically anytime you're in business, what are you doing? You got to solve a problem and you've got to find a pain point, so to speak, or where things are not going right and where you can fix that. So in essence, that's the first step. And then what we'll do is we'll go in and look at, let's say they've got retirement plans, 403Bs, 401Ks, IRAs, or whatever, and fixing those types of things. How much do I need to accumulate for retirement? Well, when are you going to retire? How much income are you going to take? Is your goal to leave some money to your kids? If you have kids, grandkids, how long are you going to work full time? You might work full time, and then you may work part time for a while in retirement. You may phase out. What's your Social Security benefits? And people say, Social Security is not going to be there. And I said, no, actually.
You hear that?
Oh, all the time.
Really?
All the time.
People actually believe that?
Yeah, especially younger people do not believe it will be there. And older people even believe it because the trust fund's going broke. People are basically saying the trust fund 2034 is broke. Mm-hmm. And most people don't even know what a trust fund is. But in essence, what it was is for many, many years, you'd have 100 people working for every one person on Social Security. Mm-hmm. So you got all this money coming out of people's paychecks, being set aside, and then you got one person collecting. Well, now it's down to less than 3 people working for every one person on Social Security. Yeah, now you see.
It went from 100 to 1 to less than 3 to 1?
Yeah. So,
over what period of time?
So it's over the past about 30, 40 years it has.
Oh my gosh, that is so drastic.
It is dramatic. So for years you had so much money coming out of people's paychecks and hardly anybody collecting that they said they built up this trust fund, which is a bunch of money that they didn't need right away. What did they invested in? Government bonds. What's a government bond? That's where government spent money that they didn't have, right? Mm-hmm. So the government borrowed the money. And what they've got going on right now is now they're having to repay those IOUs. Mm-hmm. And they figure it's all going to be gone. The IOUs are going to be gone. And Social Security is on a totally separate balance sheet than our federal government. So our government has, a budget, right? Social Security is its own deal. It is a totally separate thing. So they can't go and take regular tax money to pay for people in Social Security.
I see.
See, that's what the problem is.
Okay.
But there are a lot of potential fixes for those that don't think that it's going to be there. We could raise taxes. We could increase you only pay Social Security taxes up to a certain income level. If your income goes over about $130,000, you're not paying Social Security taxes anymore. Well, they could raise that a little bit. You see what I mean? There are a lot of potential things.
So I used to kind of think that too, and I was raised Mennonite. And the Amish and Mennonites can have a Social Security exemption. Mm-hmm. And I don't have mine anymore, but I had one at one point. And I was happy about that. I'd rather just have not paid in and kept it and invested myself and took care of myself later and blah, blah, blah. Yep. I don't have the luxury of that anymore. But, it seems to me that the feds just seem to be able to print money whenever they want it or need it, right? So couldn't they just print more money for the Social Security?
It's a separate deal. Yeah, you'd think that, but there's a separate deal, remember? So that they're off on a separate plane than the federal government is.
Huh. But the federal government still oversees it, don't they? Or
they do.
Okay.
But it's and Congress would have to change what I'm talking about.
Okay.
They would have to. And
gotcha.
There has been proposal that maybe they do that. So it's a possibility.
It just seems like if all these people are retiring, the government has to get them Social Security, right? It would just seem like it would almost be like the end of something significant, trust in the government, or all these people would be out of income, and that would be a disaster. Like that wouldn't happen, right?
Politically, it would be suicide.
Right.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So that's why I don't believe it's really going to go away.
Okay.
But as you just said something about being Social Security, and that's what you said was really, really important. You were able to exempt out of it. Social Security is set up so that if you have low income, you get a high replacement of your income. So, they take a look at 35 years of your income history and they bring it up to your age of retirement, around 60 is what they bring it up to, is age 60. And then what they do is they go, okay, so let's say you earned 100,000. Let's just use it as a number. What they'll do is they say, oh, your first $10,000 of historical income that you earned, we'll replace that at 90%. So it's, so for a low income person, it replaces a ton of their work income.
Sure. Yep.
Your next 50,000 of income approximately is replaced at 32%. Big drop, right?
I see.
And then everything above that is 15%. So what happens is if you're that person that's 100,000, you don't have a high percentage. So those people that have higher incomes, Social Security is not going to replace a whole lot of their income.
Makes sense.
For that reason.
And they know that now, and so they're doing other things like talking with you and investing wisely so that they can have a decent quality of life after they stop working, if they ever choose to stop. Which one day I guess we all will at some point, whether we choose to or not.
You may not be able to. That's right.
The 100-to-1 or 3-to-1 is blowing my mind because I knew it was drastic. I knew it was different. I did not know it was that drastic. I mean, that is very significant. Now, is that because of the workforce is lower, or is that because of the baby boomer generation moving through, or a combination? What's behind that?
It's worldwide. What's happening worldwide? You look at France, and they're panicking. China's even panicking. A lot of countries around the world, because their populations are aging so much, and they're not replacement. The replacement ratio, how many kids people are having, is too low to actually replace existing population. So Japan went through this in a huge way, and it was terrible for them. Where Japan, we thought they were going to take over the world in the 1980s. It was anything, Japan's going to wipe out the U.S., you might as well forget it. And where will Japan strike next was the cover of a magazine. Well, what happened was that their aging population created a situation where they didn't have new people coming in. And from an economic standpoint, you got a bunch of retirees on fixed income and no younger people to replace them. Their economy went backwards. So they had a huge drop in their stock market, 63% in 1989, to put that in perspective. So, it was huge. Yeah. So replacing the population is a big deal.
How is America tracking? We
are not that bad. We're not that bad. But one of the things that's helping us, quite frankly, is immigration and people coming in from other countries. We are slow. Last year was a super slow year as far as number of new children born. It's actually quite reduced, but not as bad, but it is an issue.
Now, that's interesting to hear that, because mostly I feel like what you hear kind of culturally or at a societal level is about the dangers of overpopulation, the dangers on the environment, like all of these things, like humans are bad for the environment and all of these things. But what's missed in that discussion is economics, long-term, big picture at a national level or even a global level. We need to have our population replaced.
Yeah.
Right. So just have more kids, or have kids actually, or get those kids in the workforce? Like, what is the answer there?
Yeah, part of it, and some things that countries like France are doing is daycare. For example, you go to work and you have daycare at your work center, and government paid daycare. And China had for a one-child policy forever. You only have one child, and that's it. You're done. And now they're going, we've got a problem here because we've got an aging population. And they're dependent upon younger people, and they're dependent upon the taxes that younger people pay, is really what it gets down to. So, that's a significant problem.
Can you go back to did you say at a 10% return, your money doubles every 7 years?
That's correct.
And what did you say doubles every 6 years?
That's small companies.
Okay.
Yeah, that's small companies. There's something called the rule of 72. It's kind of like a fun little math trick.
I've heard of that. Can you talk us through it, or does that not work?
Sure, it's easy. Yeah, so do you take the number 72, divide it by your interest rate? So if your interest rate is 10% or your rate of return is 10, 72 divided by 10 is 7.2. That's where the number comes from. And there's, rule of 105. Take 105 divided by your interest rate. It tells you how long it takes for money to triple. So if you think about it, 105 divided by 10 means money triples in 10 and a half years. So you go, whoa, yeah, it is. Albert Einstein said one of the most amazing innovations of all of mankind was compound interest. Because you think, and here's the way I say this to young people. Think about this. Every 7 years you wait to start preparing for retirement, you cut your retirement in half.
My gosh, that's crazy.
It is nuts.
Wow.
But you said something earlier. Let me come back to something you said earlier, because you were talking about the population, overpopulation, and things like that. I grew up. I was a child of the 70s. So what happened was, in school, we were told the same exact thing. Overpopulation. There was a book in the 1960s about that, as a matter of fact, and we were going to have a global ice age back then. You had satellite data proving that we were going into another ice age. And I have found that throughout my history that a lot of times people make prognostications that this is going to happen, and they don't necessarily see both sides of the picture. We're going to outstrip the ability for the Earth to actually support humans. Oil, we're going to run out of oil. That's what they talked about in the 1970s. What they learned, though, is how to drill horizontally. So they were able to drill straight down, but then they were able to go take a left or a right turn and go horizontally. So a lot of times people get scared about things, and they think, oh, it's coming to an end. This is going to destroy us. And I've seen it so many times that I'm kind of jaundiced to it.
Yeah. I just, the rule of 72 I'd heard, but when you think of a 10% interest doubling every 7 years, I mean,
yeah,
that is an explanation for why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, potentially, if you're not doing something about it. Because if you are making barely living wage at best, and that wage does not go up with inflation, that means your actual income basically is going down in time. And if you're not investing anything, then you basically are getting poorer and poorer if you're not having raises. Or on the other hand, if someone has $100,000 invested every 7 years, that doubles. So now it's 100, 200 to 400 to 800.
Yeah.
Or if that is a million, it goes $1 million to $2 million to $4 million. I mean, that's pretty significant.
Yeah. There was one guy that actually put it this way. It said, rich people buy assets. Poor people buy liabilities. And I like the way he said that, because you think about it, when you're borrowing money and you're getting into debt, you're making somebody else rich. You're an asset to that rich person.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and it's also true because a lot of times the poor people are buying liabilities like a car or a motorcycle, or, I mean, even a house. I guess that maybe that could go either way, probably. But
yeah, typically you want to stay away from depreciating assets when it comes to debt. Like a depreciating asset would be a car or a motorcycle or a couch or something like that goes down in value. It's okay. You can make a case for buying something that's an appreciating asset, because it's going to go up in value. So you're going to borrow money, you're going to pay interest, but your asset is going up in value as well on the other side of the equation. So you can make a case for that. So somebody might get a loan for their business because that's an asset. They can make money with it. Somebody might get a college education, get a loan for that. You can make a case for it. Though a lot of people are way more in college debt than they ought to be.
Yep.
But you make a house, would be an example of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Man, it almost makes me short of breath to talk about that. Well, also that's how the generational wealth can really build, because if it doubles every 7 years, or if you're getting not 10% interest, even doubling every 10 years, I mean, my goodness, you've passed that from generation 1 to generation 2, and that keeps doubling.
Right.
That's a big, big deal. The reason it makes me a little short on breath is probably something you don't know, is in 2019, my wife and I basically sold pretty much everything to put it into a business, and facing a turnaround situation, and we weren't able to turn it around, and it ended.
Oh, wow.
And so we went, we lost a few million on that, and that's a few million that could be doubling every 7 years, apparently.
Well, water under the bridge, and, we can't do anything about that.
It has to be, because I'm 36 years old now, and I don't have that momentum.
Right.
It's gone. And I accept full responsibility for that. Well, there's two things you can do now. One is to kind of curl up in a ball and poor me and stay out of the game. And the other is to get up and go again.
And the other thing is, look at that age, you look at that and go, how many people have done anything with a lesson like that? I remember one guy, one of his employees came to him and he says, "Oh, boss, I made this big mistake." And it was a big mistake, really expensive one. And the boss goes, he goes, "Are you going to fire me over this?" And the boss goes, "No, I just spent $50,000 on your education."
Yeah, exactly. I love that way of looking at it.